So this is tensionless part 2. So the whole objective behind this part of the tension series is to kind of help us understand what other factors other than this machines or just the machines play into tension issues. And so we're going to start. I'm going to turn this page 2. All right, make sure, and we're going to talk about the factors of the frame to the fabrics that we use, just so you have an idea of what's going on. Because I really feel like by presenting this to you all, I have learned so much more about how to help myself understand the choices I make and mitigate those choices by choosing the correct items to help me as I'm quilting. So, number one, no matter what frame you have, even if it's the cutie frame or it sits on a table, it needs to be level. And that will help with your tension because you're not fighting the machine from rolling back and forth side to side. And that also causes problems because it pulls away from you. So we want to really make it as level as possible. So do what you can to level up your machine so that the carriage doesn't pull away from you. Then check to make sure that your take-up rail, that's the rail that goes through the throat of the machine, is up off the plate at least a finger width. And so you'll see my little picture right down below. Here's the take-up rail right here I'm showing you. And then here's the little space in between. This will help you roll, help you quilt without coming into anything that's going to block. And sometimes this pole will be laying down on it, especially if you have a rolling frame. And as it fills up with fabric, it's going to start rubbing against the bottom of your machine and cause a lot more tension and friction. And so we want to keep it rolling freely, and especially if you have automation. Now, if you don't have an idler bar, this is extremely important, okay? So another factor is, and I've shown you how to level it, some key points. I'm not going to go through every little thing that I'm showing on here because I know you guys will print it off and really analyze it and learn from it. Is the tightness of how tight we are rolling our quilt and putting tension on it. Make sure that you're not doing it so tight that the fabric fibers are closing rather than opening. When you roll it so tight, you're rolling the top and the bottom, that the fibers on your fabric really close. And so it's harder for your needle to puncture down through to grab the threads. And so you can't place that notch, that tension knot evenly if you roll it too tight. So here's some pointers on how tight you should roll it. Just make sure that it's nice and smooth. Okay, don't over tighten. Pinning your quilt top to the frames and rolls. Pin from the center out. Make sure it's nice and straight. And here again, if you have a piece backing, cut off your selvages. Cut off your selvages all the time. We don't want them. We don't want to see them unless that's part of your quilt. And if that's part of your quilt, that's fine. But cut them off. Use a longer SPI, that's stitches per inch, as you're sewing the pieces together. And that, if you use a longer stitch, it's going to lay fatter and lay flatter and roll more even. And then iron your seams flat. And no matter how many pieces. So you'll see to the right of this area, I have my quilting frame. I have the names of the poles. And I just wanted to talk to you about rolling and using the poles correctly. Now, if you have a big old quilt, we're going to talk about floating versus rolling and using this all on the frame. Now, this pole right here that goes through the throat of your machine is called the take-up rail. The roll that comes and right in front of it is called the backing layer rail. Okay, so it's the one that you roll your backing onto. The one down below it is the quilt top layer rail. And then the one you'll see off to the side, that we have the batting right here. And so the batting floats down through. All right, so this next page, I want to talk to you about the fabric installment, just making sure that your backing and batting are wider and longer. And you know what? Be generous so that we have enough, as you're going to lose your backing and your batting as you're quilting. It's going to absorb all those little stitches. So make sure that we are accounting for that. You'll notice off to the right of that picture of my quilt right here, I have how to make side leaders. All I did was take a piece of fabric. I have the fold right here and I pinned it. This will really help keep your bungees out of the way. And the bungees, as good as they are, I love them. Don't get me wrong. I'm a pro side leaders or a pro bungees. However, they do get in the way of your quilt. So make this side tension leader and it will really help you so you can quilt all the way to the edge, okay? Use your bungees like they were meant to. Don't let them get in the way. Just check your tension consistently and tack down the edges as you're quilting. Make sure that you're tacking down right along the edge. If you come in somewhat and you're tacking it down, if you're quilting an edge-to-edge design, think about it. Your machine's going to be moving off the edge onto the batting and backing right along here. If it moves off and you have, say, tacked it down right along here, then it's going to pull that fabric over and you're going to have a nice little fold that you're going to have to unpick. So we don't want that. So make sure that you're tacking down along the edge, close enough to the edge that it will be hidden inside the binding, okay? And talk about floating. I love floating because it's quick and fast, but you know what? There are some quilts that I don't think you should float. So I want you to think about what the quilt is, if it's a real special quilt, and especially if you're quilting a pantograph, because you want your quilt to roll nice and even, and you want your pantograph to be aligned onto your quilt as even as possible. So make sure that you're watching that as well. Use the mini quilt clips to keep the quilt up off the floor. They are a great Christmas gift for any quilter because they really do help, or even the quilt clips in general. They really do help with the tensioning of your fabric and help you get a smoother surface as you're quilting. All right, and I just one more thing I want to talk to you about side tension is sometimes our quilts will pucker as we're sewing. Just little things happen, especially if you've quilted for others. And by using side leaders, it kind of pulls those little puckers and creases that are on the quilt, and it'll pull them out where they're laying a lot flatter, and you can make your quilting stitches kind of hide everything. So now let's just talk quickly about stitches. I just wanted to have a recap. If you see eyelashes, these are quick little things that you can check. Check your threading, change your needle, adjust your tension knob, and adjust your bobbin case. And then I've just written up if you see them on the top or the bottom. If you see them on the bottom, then it's usually something to do with your bobbin case. For some reason, those eyelashes on the bottom, or your tension's just really, really loose and you need to tighten it up. And maybe it's too tight. So just make sure you're looking at those adjustments. And then here again, I have the bobbin case. Now, one thing is you're quilting, and if you use your single stitch and you're trying to pull up your threads don't come up right away. There's a problem. And I want you, if there is a problem and it doesn't come up after trying 1 or 2 times, it's probably your bobbin case. Your thread tail is caught down in there in the hook or in the bobbin case. So check that and make sure your threading is correct all the time. Sometimes I feel like we need to double check our machines all the time. And the next thing is I wanted to recap what the stitches look like. Get to know them. Get to become their friend and identify them, because once you can identify them and once you learn what to do, it will make it go a lot quicker and a lot faster. So if you have railroad tracks on top, then loosen the tensioner. It's too tight because you're pulling the bottom thread up. If you have railroad tracks on the bottom, then you need to tighten the tensioner because it's too loose. So there's just different things that we need to look at. Ballpoint stitches. Either you don't have thick enough batting in there or no batting at all, that you're pulling too much up. And then check the spring tension position. It might be too tight, okay? And then pokey point stitches, the needle may be too large. And so check that out. And then I put to the right of this, the art of tension war. I thought this was a really good way to kind of analyze how we can pull and center our knot more accurately and easily. Now, I want you to use your senses. I want you to use your eyesight to identify. We can tell when we have a tension problem on our stitching, and it just does not look good. And I don't want us to accept that that's the way our machine does it, because I really feel like we can fix those problems. So feel with your hands. Lots of times we don't do enough feeling the stitches, and we can't tell until we take the quilt off underneath what the stitches look like. So if you take your hand and you feel underneath what your stitches feel like, if you feel them, then there's a tension problem that needs to be addressed. And then I talked about the messy stitches. Really, those messy stitches are really from no tension at all. They're just a big mess, the bird nesting. And then right over here, if you are struggling with, you've done everything in your power, then it could be a timing issue, or it could be that there's a thread caught somewhere. So just do your due diligence and go around and just double check things. Now we're getting to the tensioner assembly. And I put a tension assembly. Okay, so I want you to get to know and understand these parts. And if you do, and if you go through the little tensioner assembly parts list and understand how they work, it will help you understand how to adjust tension even better. Because it relates to how tight we're pressing down on our threads to give us that good tension, or how loose we need to. And that little check spring is really important as it's moving up and down. So if you have a check spring that's not even moving at all, going up and down, then you've got a tension problem. So check that out and watch what you're doing. Get to know and understand what their names are, how they work. And for this one, I'm showing you how to reset the check spring, and this is from the manual. And this one right here to the right is all the parts and the role that they play and how to put it back together. It's kind of interesting, you guys. It's pretty cool how this little mechanism, how it works and what it does for tension is just so important and so valuable. All right, so I have a little video that I want to share with you. And cute little Alyssa from the Sewing Lab, she's going to talk to you about the tensioner.
All right, guys, so today we are going to show you how to take out and put in a new thread tensioner, as well as resetting the check spring on it. So to take it out, it's pretty simple. You would use whatever tool correlates with the machine that you have. We can get a list of that. You would loosen it, so turn it to counterclockwise. You're going to loosen that set screw and it should just pull right out. Alternatively, to put it in, you would simply put the tensioner in, and you want to be mindful of where this check spring position is. I don't know if you can see right up here, but there's a little slot that it goes into and it slides up and down. So at the very top resting spot, you want to install your tensioner usually between, like, if this was a clock, if this whole dial was a clock, between 10:30 and 11:30. So right now I am going to just position it right there, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten my set screw again. And that is how you install a tensioner.
Okay. Next video,
All right,
you
guys.
guys.
So today we are going to show you how to take out and put in a new thread tensioner, as well as
Okay, here's the next video.
Okay, now we're going to show you how to reset your check spring. We put a little piece of orange tape on here just so it's easier for you guys to see the spring actually moving. And what we're going to do is we're going to take any kind of flathead object. If you have a screwdriver that will fit in there, I actually just use an old scissors. It fits actually in between the little this notch inside the tensioner pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick the scissors in there, and I am going to start rotating the entire tensioner counterclockwise. And what I'm going to be doing is this little slot here, I'm going to be rotating it so that the check spring actually comes down and moves all the way down to the bottom. So you can see on here, when I rotate it, that spring should start moving. And I'm just going to keep rotating it until it gets to the bottom of that slot. It can only go so far. You'll see eventually it will stop moving. So it's bottomed out right now. So once I get to the very lowest point, I'm going to go ahead and start rotating it back clockwise to bring the spring right back up. And you can see that it's moving on there now. And right when I get to the edge of the lip, the spring should stop moving. So you can see right now it's not moving, but I could keep turning it. The spring wouldn't move any further, but the actual tensioner is. So right when you get right to the top, right where it just kind of stops on its own, that's when you want to stop turning. And that is how you reset your check spring. Okay.
Thanks, Alyssa. Okay, so sometimes we can create our own tension problems, and I don't think we recognize that it's by the choices that we make. And so I made this little screen. Fabric, batting, and threads, oh my, can cause added tension and make us cry, because it really can. The choices that we make, we don't sometimes realize that maybe we haven't used the correct needle or to sew through denim. And so we have to hunt, and we don't recognize that on a t-shirt quilt, how we need to use a different size needle or a different style of needle, or the threads, how important they are. And so when you're pulling all these components together, we may pick the incorrect batting to go with denim. Do we need batting? It's really heavy. Or, as you're using minky, that's also another factor. It can be very slick and hard to work with, and that can add tension problems. So by identifying what we're going to be using and preparing can really help us move through the quilting process much quicker. Sorry, you guys. It's been a long day. And so by understanding how the thread that the batting adds an extra drag on it, so you might have to loosen up the tension slightly. That might be the polyester is easier for the thread to move through, so you might have to tighten it just a little bit. The thickness of the batting and the backing and the top also play a really big important role on tension. And so are we using the correct needle? Are we adjusting the height of our pulls correctly to accommodate the extra height? And have we used the foot height correctly? Have we adjusted all those things? So cotton threads even tend to have more grab than, say, polyester. Polyester, if you think about it, have a more slick surface as it's going through, so they're a little smoother. But the cotton, it's a little more grabby. And so when you're thinking about it and you're not using the correct needle or even the right size weight thread as you're quilting, it can cause us added tension. So I wanted us to just stop and think about what we are using and how we are going to use it. With this next screen, I just wanted to talk about the different styles of fabrics, and then we're going to jump into the different styles of battings. Silk fabrics, I don't want us to be limited on what we can be using as we're quilting. I want us to be exploratory and try new things and be brave and fearless and say, man, I can handle this. I can be a trailblazer and really work through some of these things because this is what I want to use. So, how do I help myself use the fabrics that I want to use by picking the right size needle? So, with silk fabrics, it's a finer fabric, it's thinner. And so, we need to use the right size needle, a little lighter, and a lighter weight thread. And so, when you're using that denim fabrics, we'll need a little beefier needle and a little beefier thread to get through it. And the polyesters, again, it's the same thing. So just think quickly about what you're using, how you're using it, and collect the right materials to help you move through the quilting process much quicker and much faster. And when it comes to batting, just like fabric, just like threads, there are different styles and different types. And the questions I really want you to ask yourself is, will it be washed a lot? And how is it going to just hang around? How's it going to be used? Do I want it a little more lofty or do I want it a little more thin? Do I want it hang straighter? Do I want it to lay on the bed? Is somebody going to cuddle up in it? Do I want it to be a little softer? So, and then those kind of things will help us understand the kind of the designs and stuff like that and how we want to quilt it. But by deciding and reading about the different styles of batting, it's going to help you move through your process a lot quicker. And I like to use a double layer of a thinner batting. And sometimes I like to use a little thicker and a little thinner because I feel like it will hang straighter. Wool batting is great for hanging straight, but it's very, very heavy. So read this and it will help you understand what you need to pick and choose for the different quilts that you are creating. And then last but not least, we can celebrate good tension times, and I want us to all come on. And we here at the Grace Company, we have your back. And we want to help you move forward, and we want you to help us move forward in our company because without you, we wouldn't be here today. And we love and appreciate you and all that you bring to the table. Thank you so much for coming and being part of this. I know that we're all busy and that we have hectic schedules, and I just want us to explore. I want us to have fun, and I want us to get to know each other and grow our little community of Quilters Playground. And the sky's the limit, you guys. We can tackle the world. Thanks.